Thunder's blood boiled as he watched the callous millionaire abandon his screaming twin daughters in the depths of the merciless forest. The stallion knew in that instant he would shatter his stall door tonight and risk everything to save these innocent children, even if finding them meant challenging the wilderness itself. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video and comment on where you're watching from. Let's get started. The morning sun cast long shadows through the ancient oak trees that surrounded the Blackwood estate. The sprawling mansion, with its imposing stone facade and manicured gardens, stood as a testament to the wealth and power of its owner, Edward Blackwood. At 45, Edward was a man whose cold eyes matched the steel gray of his perfectly trimmed hair. His success in business had made him one of the richest men in the county, but that same drive had hardened his heart to everything except wealth and status. In the stables behind the mansion, away from the opulent display of the main house, stood a magnificent stallion named Thunder. With a coat as black as midnight and a white star-shaped mark on his forehead, Thunder was no ordinary horse. His intelligent eyes seemed to understand more than any animal should, observing the world around him with a quiet wisdom. Edward had purchased Thunder 3 years ago for an exorbitant sum, not out of love for the animal, but because such a magnificent creature was a symbol of status, another trophy to add to his collection. The stable hands whispered about Thunder, about how he seemed to watch and listen, how his eyes followed conversations as if he understood every word. Some even swore they had seen him comfort other horses when they were distressed, pressing his strong body against theirs or nuzzling them gently, but Edward had no interest in such stories. To him, Thunder was merely a possession, valuable only for the impression he made on guests and business associates. What Edward didn't know was that Thunder had been observing him too, watching the cruelty that simmered beneath his polished exterior. The stallion had seen how Edward treated his staff with contempt, how he viewed the world as something to be conquered rather than cherished. And most of all, Thunder had observed Edward's relationship with his twin daughters, Lily and Rose. At 6 years old, the twins were identical in appearance but different in spirit. Lily was bold and curious, while Rose was gentle and thoughtful. Both shared the same golden curls and bright blue eyes that they had inherited from their mother, Elizabeth, who had passed away giving birth to them. Perhaps it was this tragic beginning that had poisoned Edward's relationship with his daughters from the start. He had never wanted children, seeing them as distractions from his ambitions. Elizabeth had been the one who longed for a family, and her death had left Edward with 2 unwanted reminders of what he had lost. As the girls grew, Edward became increasingly distant. He hired nannies to care for them, servants to feed them, tutors to educate them, but he himself could barely stand to be in the same room as them. The twins' innocent laughter echoed through the cold halls of Blackwood Estate, but never seemed to reach their father's heart. To Edward, they were burdens, complications that disrupted his carefully controlled life. Thunder had watched all this unfold from his stable. The twins often came to visit him, bringing carrots and apples stolen from the kitchen. They would climb onto the wooden fence and talk to him for hours, sharing their secrets and dreams. Thunder would listen, his large eyes fixed on them, his ears forward in attention. Sometimes, when they were especially sad after another rejection from their father, he would gently nuzzle their small hands, offering what comfort he could. That morning, as the dew still clung to the grass, something had changed in the routine of Blackwood Estate. Thunder sensed it immediately. There was tension in the air, a heaviness that made his skin twitch. From his stall, he watched as Edward emerged from the house, his face set in grim determination. Behind him came the twins, dressed in their best clothes, their small faces confused and frightened. "Get in the car," Edward commanded, his voice sharp in the quiet morning. The girls hesitated, looking at each other with uncertainty, before slowly climbing into the back seat of the sleek black car. Thunder pawed at the ground, suddenly restless. He moved to the edge of his stall, stretching his neck to see better. One of the stable hands, young Thomas, approached with his morning feed. "Something's not right," Thomas murmured, following Thunder's gaze to where Edward was now instructing his driver. "The master never takes the girls anywhere, especially not this early." Thunder snorted in agreement, his ears flicking back and forth as he tried to catch the conversation happening by the car. Edward's voice carried across the yard, the words indistinct, but the tone unmistakably cold. The twins sat silently in the back seat, their small figures barely visible through the tinted windows. Thomas placed the feed bucket in Thunder's stall and patted his neck. "I don't like it either, boy, but it's not our place to question the master's business." As Thomas walked away, Thunder continued to watch, a growing unease building within him. When the car finally pulled away, disappearing down the long driveway that led away from Blackwood Estate, Thunder's instinct screamed that something terrible was about to happen. Hours passed, and the unease in Thunder's chest only grew stronger. He paced his stall, refusing to eat, his eyes constantly returning to the driveway, waiting for the car to return. When it finally did, just as the sun was reaching its highest point, Thunder strained to see who was inside. Edward emerged alone, his face expressionless as he strode back into the mansion without a glance toward the stables. The twins were nowhere to be seen. That night, as darkness fell over Blackwood Estate, Thunder heard the whispers among the staff. The kitchen maid spoke to Thomas in hushed, horrified tones just outside the stable. "He sent them away," she said, her voice trembling with anger and disbelief. "To some boarding school abroad, he says, without any warning, without letting them say goodbye to anyone. Those poor little lambs, they must be so frightened." Thomas shook his head, his young face troubled. "It doesn't make sense. Why now? And why so suddenly?" The maid looked around nervously before leaning closer. Martha overheard him on the phone. He was talking about starting fresh, about being unburdened. She said. The maid lowered her voice even further, but Thunder's sensitive ears caught every word. "She said she doesn't believe they're at any school. She thinks he's done something terrible." Thunder's muscles tensed as he listened, understanding more than either human would have believed possible. He had seen the coldness in Edward's eyes, had felt the man's capacity for cruelty, and he had seen the fear in the twins' faces as they were driven away that morning. In that moment, as the terrible suspicion took root, Thunder made a decision. He had watched for too long, had been passive in the face of Edward's growing darkness. Whatever had happened to Lily and Rose, he would not stand by any longer. With newfound determination, Thunder began to plan his escape. He would find the twins, whatever it took. The opportunity came just before dawn. Thomas, distracted by his concerns for the missing girls, forgot to properly secure Thunder's stall. With a gentle push of his powerful head, the stall door swung open. Thunder stepped out, his hooves silent on the straw-covered floor. He made his way to the stable entrance, pausing only briefly to look back at the place that had been his prison for 3 years. Then, with a toss of his proud head, Thunder galloped into the forest, following an instinct that pulled him toward the twins, with an urgency he couldn't explain but couldn't ignore. Behind him, Blackwood Estate grew smaller, its shadows no longer able to touch him as he raced toward a destiny that would change everything. Thunder's powerful muscles worked tirelessly as he galloped through the morning mist, his instincts guiding him away from the main roads and deeper into the ancient forest that bordered Blackwood Estate. The woods were dense and wild, untamed lands that Edward had often threatened to develop but had never touched. It was as if even his greed recognized some boundaries, or perhaps he simply hadn't found the right price yet for destroying something so ancient. The stallion moved with purpose, his senses alert to every sound and scent. He had no rational plan, only an overwhelming certainty that he needed to find Lily and Rose. Their sweet faces were imprinted in his memory, their innocence, their kindness, and most recently, their fear. That fear had awoken something primal in Thunder, a protective instinct that transcended the natural boundaries between human and animal. As the sun climbed higher, dappling the forest floor with patches of golden light, Thunder slowed his pace to navigate the increasingly difficult terrain. The forest grew denser here, the underbrush thicker, the trees more closely packed together. His ears flicked back and forth, catching the sounds of birds, of small animals scurrying through the undergrowth, of water trickling somewhere nearby, but no human voices, no sign of the twins. Thunder paused beside a small stream, lowering his head to drink. The cool water refreshed him, clearing his mind. As he raised his head, droplets falling from his muzzle, he caught a scent on the breeze, the faint trace of something familiar. He inhaled deeply, sorting through the complex tapestry of forest smells until he isolated it. The lavender soap that the twins always used, a scent that often lingered on their small hands when they came to pet him. With renewed determination, Thunder followed the scent, picking his way carefully through the forest. The path grew steeper, leading up toward the hills that overlooked the valley where Blackwood Estate lay. The lavender scent grew stronger, mingled now with something else, the saltiness of tears. Then he heard it, a soft, muffled sob that made his heart race. Thunder quickened his pace, moving as fast as the dense forest allowed until he reached a small clearing. There, huddled beneath the spreading branches of an ancient oak tree, were Lily and Rose. The twins were still wearing the fine dresses they had been dressed in that morning, but the fabric was now dirty and torn. Their golden curls were tangled with leaves and twigs, and their faces were streaked with tears and dirt. They sat close together, arms wrapped around each other, two small figures alone in the vastness of the forest. Thunder approached slowly, not wanting to frighten them. His hooves made soft sounds on the forest floor, alerting the girls to his presence. Lily looked up first, her red-rimmed eyes widening in disbelief. "Thunder," she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. "Is that really you?" Rose raised her head from her sister's shoulder, blinking as if she couldn't trust her eyes. "Thunder," she echoed, a tremulous smile breaking through her tears. The stallion moved closer, lowering his head to nuzzle each girl gently. They reached for him with trembling hands, touching his face, his neck, as if to convince themselves he was real. Then, as if a dam had broken, words poured out of them, their voices overlapping in their rush to explain. "Father drove us out here. He said we were going to see the sunrise. But then he stopped the car and made us get out. He said we had to walk into the forest. He said there was a special surprise. But then he just drove away. We tried to follow the car, but it was too fast. And then we couldn't find the road again. We've been walking for hours. We're so scared, Thunder. We don't know how to get home." Their words tumbled over each other, punctuated by hiccups and fresh tears. Thunder stood perfectly still, allowing them to cling to him, offering the solid comfort of his presence. The full horror of what Edward had done sank into him like a physical weight. He had abandoned his own children in the forest, leaving them to die or hoping they would simply disappear from his life. The thought filled Thunder with a rage so intense it took all his self-control not to rear up and scream his fury to the sky. Instead, he focused on the immediate needs of the twins. They were frightened, exhausted, and although they didn't say it, he could see they were hungry and thirsty too. Gently, he nudged them toward the stream he had passed earlier. The girls understood and followed him, their small hands buried in his mane for reassurance. At the stream, they drank eagerly, cupping the clear water in their hands. Thunder waited patiently, keeping watch over them, his ears alert for any danger. When they had drunk their fill, Lily looked up at him with a determination that belied her 6 years. "Can you take us home, Thunder?" she asked, her voice small but steady. Thunder snorted softly. He could, of course, lead them back to Blackwood Estate, but the thought of returning the twins to their father, to the man who had callously abandoned them, made every fiber of his being rebel. No, he could not take them back there. But where could he take them? Who would protect these children if he did not? As if sensing his dilemma, Rose spoke up, her voice gentler than her sister's, but no less resolute. "Not back to father," she said, shaking her head. "He doesn't want us anymore. He said we were burdens." Her voice broke on the last word, and fresh tears welled in her eyes. Lily put an arm around her sister's shoulders. "He said we reminded him too much of Mother, and that he couldn't stand to look at us anymore." The words were delivered with a child's directness, but the pain behind them was adult in its intensity. Thunder lowered his head to nuzzle them again, wishing he could speak, wishing he could tell them that their father's cruelty was no reflection on them, but all he could do was offer his presence, his silent support. And suddenly, he knew what he had to do. There was a place, not far from here, where he had sometimes been taken for rides. A small farm at the edge of the forest, where an elderly couple lived. He had seen them from a distance, their kind faces, the gentle way they spoke to each other and to their animals. If anyone would help the twins, it would be them. Decision made, Thunder knelt down on the forest floor, an invitation that the girls understood immediately. With childish agility, Lily clambered onto his back first, then helped Rose up behind her. Their combined weight was nothing to Thunder's powerful frame, and once they were settled, their small hands gripping his mane, he rose carefully to his feet. "Where are we going?" Rose asked, her voice wavering between fear and hope. Thunder couldn't answer, but he moved forward with such confidence that both girls relaxed a little, trusting him implicitly. He picked his way through the forest with exquisite care, conscious of his precious cargo. The twins clung to him, occasionally whispering to each other or to him, their voices gradually losing the edge of panic that had gripped them earlier. As they traveled, the forest began to thin out, the trees becoming more widely spaced, the underbrush less dense. Thunder increased his pace slightly, eager now to reach their destination before darkness fell. The sun was already beginning its descent, casting longer shadows across their path. The twins had fallen silent, exhaustion finally catching up with them. He could feel Rose's head resting against her sister's back, could sense Lily fighting to stay awake, her small body swaying slightly with the rhythm of his movement. The last rays of sunlight were painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples when Thunder finally emerged from the forest. Ahead lay a small valley, nestled between gentle hills, where a modest farmhouse stood surrounded by fields and orchards. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, promising warmth and shelter. To Thunder, it looked like salvation. The twins had fallen into an exhausted sleep, their small bodies swaying with his movements. Lily's head drooped forward, while Rose remained pressed against her sister's back, her arms wrapped tightly around Lily's waist. Thunder moved carefully, not wanting to wake them until they reached safety. His own body ached from the day's exertion, but he pressed on, driven by an instinct to protect these innocent children who had been so cruelly abandoned. As Thunder approached the farmhouse, lights flickered on inside, golden squares against the gathering dusk. A dog barked, alerting the inhabitants to visitors. The front door opened, spilling more light onto the worn path that led to the house. An elderly man stepped out, squinting into the twilight. "Hello?" he called, his voice weathered but kind. "Who's there?" The sound roused Lily, who lifted her head groggily. "Where are we?" she murmured, then gasped as she took in their surroundings. "Thunder, you found people." Her voice woke Rose, who blinked in confusion before tightening her grip on her sister. "Who are they?" she whispered, fear evident in her voice. Before Lily could answer, the elderly man approached, his steps slowing as he made out the unusual sight before him. A magnificent black stallion carrying two small children. Behind him, a woman appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. "Martha," the man called over his shoulder, "come quick, there are children here." Martha hurried down the path to join her husband, her lined face creasing with concern as she took in the scene. "Oh my goodness," she breathed. "You poor dears. What on earth are you doing out here alone?" Thunder stopped a respectful distance away, allowing the elderly couple to approach slowly. The twins clung to each other, suddenly shy in the presence of strangers. It was Lily who found her voice first. "Our father left us in the forest," she said, the simple statement hanging in the air like a physical thing. "Thunder found us and brought us here." Martha's hand flew to her mouth, while her husband's weathered face darkened with anger. "Left you in the forest?" he repeated, as if unable to comprehend such cruelty. "Who would do such a thing?" "Our father," Rose whispered, tears welling in her eyes again. "He said we were burdens." Martha moved forward then, her motherly instincts overriding any caution. "Well, you're not burdens here," she said firmly. "You're children who need help, and that's exactly what you'll get." She extended her arms toward them. "Come inside where it's warm. You must be hungry and tired." The twins looked at each other, then at Thunder, as if seeking his approval. The stallion dipped his head, encouraging them. Carefully, Martha helped first Rose, then Lily down from Thunder's back. Once on solid ground, the girls swayed with exhaustion, and Martha quickly gathered them close. "Harold," she said to her husband, "these children need food and rest immediately." She looked at Thunder, noticing for the first time the quality of his breeding, the obvious care with which he had been maintained despite the day's journey. "And this magnificent animal has brought them to us. He needs tending too." Harold nodded, his kind eyes meeting Thunder's intelligent gaze. "I'll see to the horse," he said. "You take the children inside." As Martha led the twins toward the warmth of the farmhouse, Thunder watched carefully, only relaxing when he saw them disappear safely inside. Then he allowed Harold to lead him to a small but clean stable adjacent to the house. There, the elderly man removed bits of twigs and leaves from Thunder's coat, checked his hooves for stones, and provided fresh water and hay. "You're no ordinary horse, are you?" Harold murmured as he worked, noting the way Thunder watched the house, the intelligence in his dark eyes. "Don't worry. Martha and I will take care of those little ones. No one will hurt them here." Thunder snorted softly, as if in agreement, and only then allowed himself to eat and drink. The journey had depleted his strength, but his mind remained alert, processing all that had happened. He had acted on instinct, without plan or foresight, driven only by the need to save the twins. Now he needed to ensure they remained safe. Inside the farmhouse, Martha had bustled the twins into the kitchen, where the warmth from the wood stove enveloped them like a blanket. She had filled a basin with warm water and was gently washing their faces and hands, murmuring soft words of comfort as she worked. The girls submitted to her ministrations silently, too exhausted and overwhelmed to resist. "My name is Martha Collins," she told them as she dried Rose's face with a soft towel. "And that's my husband, Harold. We've lived on this farm for 50 years. What are your names, dears?" "I'm Lily," said the bolder twin. "And this is my sister, Rose. We're 6 years old." Martha smiled, though her eyes remained troubled. Such pretty names for such pretty girls. "Now let's get some food into you, and then you can tell us more about what happened." She served them a simple but hearty meal of vegetable soup, fresh bread, and milk. The twins ate hungrily, their initial shyness giving way to the basic need for sustenance. As they ate, Martha coaxed their story from them bit by bit, their life at Blackwood Estate, their distant father, the terrible events of the day, and Thunder's miraculous rescue. "He's the best horse in the world," Lily declared, her eyes shining despite her exhaustion. "He's always been nice to us, even when Father wasn't looking." "He knew exactly where to bring us," Rose added softly, "like he was protecting us." Martha and Harold exchanged glances over the children's heads. They had lived long enough to know that there were mysteries in this world that defied simple explanation, bonds between creatures that transcended the expected. They didn't doubt the children's story for a moment. "Well," Martha said finally, "you're safe now, and you'll stay here as long as you need to." The twins looked at her with matching expressions of hope and uncertainty. "Really?" Rose asked, her voice small. "You won't send us back to Father?" Martha's face hardened with a determination that transformed her gentle features. "No one is sending you back to a man who would abandon his children in the forest," she said firmly. "No one." Meanwhile, at Blackwood Estate, chaos had erupted. The discovery of Thunder's empty stall had initially caused only minor concern. A valuable horse loose was certainly a problem, but not an emergency. But as the day wore on and the stable hands searched the immediate grounds without success, Edward had been informed. His reaction had been surprisingly muted. "Find the animal," he had ordered curtly. "It's worth a considerable sum." It wasn't until evening, when one of the maids tentatively inquired about the twins' whereabouts, that the full situation became clear. No one had seen Lily and Rose since they had left with their father that morning. When questioned directly, Edward had responded with cold indifference. "They've been sent away to school," he said, not meeting anyone's eyes. "It was a sudden decision, but for the best." But the staff, already suspicious of the morning's events, didn't believe him. Thomas, the young stable hand who had grown fond of the twins during their visits to Thunder, was particularly unconvinced. As darkness fell, he slipped away from the estate, making his way to the local police station in the village. There, he shared his concerns, his voice shaking with emotion as he described the twins' disappearance and the unnerving behavior of their father. Dawn broke over Blackwood Estate with an eerie quiet. The usual morning activities, gardeners tending the immaculate grounds, kitchen staff preparing breakfast, maids dusting the countless ornaments that filled the mansion, were subdued, overshadowed by the events of the previous day. The disappearance of the twins and Thunder had created a palpable tension that hung in the air like the morning mist. The silence was shattered by the arrival of 2 police cars, their tires crunching on the gravel driveway. Edward was still in his study, nursing his second glass of brandy despite the early hour, when his butler informed him that the police insisted on speaking with him. His face remained impassive, but his hand tightened around the crystal glass. "Show them in," he said, his voice cold and controlled. "And then ensure we are not disturbed." Inspector James Morgan was not a man easily intimidated by wealth or status. A veteran of 20 years on the force, he had seen enough of human nature to know that privilege often masked the darkest hearts. As he entered Edward's study, his keen eyes took in the opulent surroundings, the leather-bound books that looked unread, the expensive artwork chosen for value rather than appreciation, the imposing desk that served as a barrier between Edward and the world. "Mr. Blackwood," Morgan began without preamble, "I'm here about your daughters, Lily and Rose." Edward's expression didn't change. "They've been sent to boarding school in Switzerland," he said smoothly. "A last-minute decision, I admit, but I felt it was in their best interests." Morgan didn't blink. "That's interesting, Mr. Blackwood, because we've contacted every boarding school in Switzerland and none of them have any record of enrolling twin girls named Lily and Rose Blackwood." A flicker of something, anger, fear, crossed Edward's face before it settled back into its mask of indifference. "There must be some misunderstanding," he said. "My assistant handled the arrangements. Perhaps there's been a clerical error." "Perhaps," Morgan agreed, his tone making it clear he didn't believe a word. "We'd like to speak with this assistant." "He's away on business," Edward replied too quickly. "He'll return next week." Morgan leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Blackwood, one of your stable hands has expressed serious concerns about your daughter's welfare. He reports that they left with you yesterday morning and haven't been seen since. Additionally, a valuable horse is missing from your stables. These circumstances, combined with your inconsistent explanations, give us cause for concern." Edward's composure finally cracked. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the polished floor. "This is outrageous. You're taking the word of a stable boy over mine. Do you have any idea who I am, who my connections are?" Morgan remained seated, unruffled by the display. "I'm quite aware of who you are, Mr. Blackwood. What concerns me is who your daughters are and where they might be." Miles away, in the cozy farmhouse kitchen, Martha was braiding Rose's hair, while Lily sat at the table, drawing pictures with crayons Harold had found in a drawer. The girls had slept deeply after their ordeal, waking to find clean clothes laid out for them, simple farm dresses that Martha had kept from her own daughter's childhood, carefully preserved in a cedar chest. "There you go, sweetheart," Martha said, tying off Rose's braid with a ribbon. "Pretty as a picture." Rose touched the braid shyly. "Thank you," she whispered. In the light of day, in the safety of the farmhouse, she seemed even smaller, more fragile than she had appeared the night before. Lily looked up from her drawing. "Can we see Thunder now?" she asked. "We want to make sure he's okay." Martha smiled. "Of course you can. Harold's been taking good care of him, but I'm sure Thunder would love to see you both." The twins hurried outside, their small feet pattering on the wooden floors. Martha watched them go, her heart heavy with the knowledge of what they had endured. She and Harold had discussed the situation late into the night, after the children were asleep. They knew they should contact the authorities, report what had happened. But the thought of sending these traumatized children back to the father who had abandoned them was unbearable. "We'll keep them safe until we figure out what's best," Harold had said finally. "That's all we can do for now." Martha had agreed, though she knew they were walking a dangerous line. Harboring someone else's children, even with the best intentions, could have serious consequences. But looking at Lily and Rose now, running toward the stable with newfound energy, she couldn't bring herself to regret their decision. In the stable, Thunder's ears perked up at the sound of small feet running toward him. He had spent a restless night, his mind filled with images of Edward Blackwood's cold eyes, of the twins' tears, of the long journey through the forest. Harold had treated him well, providing clean straw, fresh water, and good hay. But Thunder remained alert, ready to flee or fight if necessary. When the twins burst into the stable, their faces alight with relief and joy, something in Thunder's chest loosened. They were safe. They were well. His mission had been accomplished. "Thunder!" Lily cried, rushing to his stall. "We were so worried about you." Rose joined her sister, reaching up to stroke Thunder's velvety nose. "Thank you for saving us," she said, her voice soft but steady. "You're the bravest horse in the world." Thunder lowered his head, allowing the girls to pet him, their touch gentle and familiar. He could sense a change in them, a fragile peace that had replaced the raw fear of the previous day. They were recovering, finding their footing in this new place with these kind people. It gave him hope. Harold appeared in the stable doorway, watching the reunion with a thoughtful expression. "You three have quite a bond," he observed. "Never seen anything like it." Lily turned to him, her face serious. "Thunder's special," she said. "Father never saw it, but we always knew." Harold nodded, accepting this as the simple truth it was. "Well, he's welcome here for as long as you are," he said. though I suspect some folks might be looking for such a fine animal." Rose's eyes widened with fear. "They can't take him back. Father will punish him for running away." "No one's taking anyone anywhere they don't want to go," Harold assured her quickly. "Not while I have anything to say about it." Back at Blackwood Estate, the questioning had grown more intense. Inspector Morgan had brought in additional officers who were now searching the grounds, focusing particularly on the forest that bordered the property. Edward had called his lawyer, a thin, sharp-faced man named Jameson, who arrived in record time and immediately attempted to halt the investigation. "My client has cooperated fully," Jameson insisted, standing protectively beside Edward's desk. "These accusations are baseless and potentially defamatory. Mr. Blackwood is a respected businessman and a loving father." Morgan wasn't deterred. "Then he won't mind explaining exactly where his daughters are with verifiable proof," he countered. "Until then, we'll continue our investigation." Edward's face had grown increasingly pale as the morning wore on. The casual confidence with which he had dismissed his daughter's absence was crumbling under the persistent questioning. Now, with officers combing the forest, a new fear began to take root. What if they found evidence of what he had done? What if they somehow tracked where the girls had gone? "This is harassment," Edward snapped, but his voice lacked conviction. "I want these people off my property, Jameson." The lawyer looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Blackwood, if your daughters are indeed at a boarding school, providing documentation would be the simplest way to end this unpleasantness." Edward shot him a venomous look. "Whose side are you on?" Meanwhile, Thomas, the young stable hand who had alerted the police, was leading a group of officers through the forest, retracing the route he believed Edward had taken with the twins the previous day. His knowledge of the estate's grounds, gained from years of exercising the horses through these very woods, made him an invaluable guide. "Mr. Blackwood sometimes took this road when he wanted to avoid being seen," Thomas explained, pointing to a narrow dirt track that branched off from the main path. "It leads deep into the forest before connecting with the highway on the other side." Officer Lewis crouched down, examining the muddy ground at the edge of the forest clearing. "Tire tracks," he confirmed, looking up at Inspector Morgan. "Someone stopped here recently, and look at this." He pointed to smaller impressions in the soft earth. Children's footprints heading into the forest. Morgan's expression darkened as he surveyed the scene. The clearing was isolated, far from any main road or hiking trail, the perfect place to abandon someone without witnesses. He turned to Thomas, who stood nearby, his young face tight with worry. "These tracks," Morgan asked, "would they match Mr. Blackwood's car?" Thomas nodded slowly. "It's a custom Bentley. Not many like it around here." Morgan straightened up, brushing dirt from his knees. "Let's keep following the children's tracks, see where they lead." The search party moved deeper into the forest, following the small footprints that told a heartbreaking story. The twins had clearly wandered in circles for some time, their tracks overlapping and doubling back before heading in a more purposeful direction. And then, alongside the children's footprints, they found something else. Hoofprints, large and distinctive. "Thunder," Thomas breathed, recognizing the unique pattern of the stallion's shoes. "He found them." Morgan looked at him sharply. "The missing horse found the children? Are you suggesting—" "Thunder was always protective of the twins," Thomas interrupted, his voice earnest. "They had a special connection. Everyone at the estate noticed it." Morgan raised an eyebrow, but didn't dismiss the idea outright. In his years on the force, he had learned that animals sometimes demonstrated intelligence and loyalty that defied simple explanation. "So the horse found the children," he said, thinking aloud. "And then what? Where did they go?" The hoofprints and the children's footprints continued together, leading away from the clearing, away from Blackwood Estate toward the distant hills. Morgan instructed his team to follow the trail while he returned to question Edward further. The evidence they had found was damning, but he wanted a confession, wanted to see the arrogant man forced to admit what he had done to his own flesh and blood. Back at the estate, Edward's composure had completely crumbled. His lawyer had stepped outside to make a phone call, leaving him alone with his darkening thoughts. He paced his study, a caged animal sensing the tightening of a trap. He hadn't expected anyone to question the twins' absence so quickly, hadn't anticipated the police involvement. It had seemed so simple when he planned it. Remove the constant reminder of his dead wife, free himself to remarry without the complication of children from his first marriage. The sound of tires on gravel announced Morgan's return. Edward steeled himself, trying to recapture the cold confidence that had served him so well in business. But when Morgan entered the study, the expression on his face told Edward everything he needed to know. They had found something. "We discovered the clearing, Mr. Blackwood," Morgan said without preamble. "We found where you stopped your car, where you made your daughters get out and walk into the forest alone." Edward's face drained of color. "You can't prove anything," he whispered, but the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. Morgan continued relentlessly. "We followed their footprints. 2 little girls, wandering lost and afraid. What kind of father abandons his children in the forest, Mr. Blackwood? What kind of man does that?" Something broke in Edward then. Perhaps it was the weight of his crime finally crashing down on him, or perhaps it was simply the realization that his carefully constructed life was unraveling beyond repair. "They reminded me of her," he said, his voice barely audible. "Every time I looked at them, I saw Elizabeth dying, over and over again." Morgan's disgust was palpable. "So you left them to die?" Edward flinched. "I didn't think," he began, then stopped. What could he say? That he hadn't considered what would happen to 2 6-year-old girls alone in the forest, that he had convinced himself someone would find them eventually. Any explanation would only condemn him further. "Your daughters are still missing," Morgan said, watching Edward's face carefully. "Along with a valuable horse from your stables. I find myself hoping the animal found them, that they're together somewhere, safe." A flicker of surprise crossed Edward's face. "Thunder, what does he have to do with this?" Morgan didn't answer directly. "We'll continue searching, Mr. Blackwood. And when we find your daughters, I promise you will face the full consequences of what you've done." Miles away, in the peaceful valley where Harold and Martha's farm nestled among rolling hills, the twins were beginning to settle into a new routine. 3 days had passed since their arrival, and each day brought a little more color to their cheeks, a little more confidence to their movements. Martha had contacted a trusted friend who worked as a nurse in the nearest town, asking her to check on the girls discreetly. The woman had confirmed what Martha already suspected. The twins were physically unharmed but emotionally traumatized by their ordeal. "Give them time," the nurse had advised. "Children are resilient, especially when they feel safe and loved." Martha and Harold took this advice to heart, creating a gentle structure that included simple chores, plenty of rest, nutritious meals, and time with Thunder. The stallion had become a central part of the twins' healing process. They spent hours in his company, sometimes riding him bareback around the small paddock, sometimes simply sitting beside him in the stable, talking softly about their feelings. "I don't think Father ever loved us," Lily said one afternoon as she and Rose brushed Thunder's gleaming coat. "Not really." Rose was quiet for a moment, her brush moving in rhythmic strokes along Thunder's flank. "I think he was too sad about Mother to love anyone," she finally replied, her voice thoughtful beyond her years. Lily considered this. "Do you think Martha and Harold will let us stay here forever?" she asked, changing the subject. Rose looked toward the farmhouse where Martha could be seen hanging laundry on a line, her movements unhurried and peaceful. "I hope so," she said simply. Thunder listened to their conversation, his ears flicking back and forth. He had grown to trust Harold and Martha, sensing their genuine kindness and their deep concern for the twins. The farm was a good place, far from the cold opulence of Blackwood Estate. Here, there was honest work, fresh air, and a warmth that had nothing to do with material wealth. It was a fitting home for two children who had never known true parental love. But Thunder remained vigilant. He had not forgotten the threat that Edward posed, nor had he forgotten the journey that had brought them here. Each night, after the twins had gone to bed, Thunder would stand at the edge of his paddock, facing the direction of Blackwood Estate, as if standing guard against any danger that might approach. Harold noticed this behavior and mentioned it to Martha one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. "That horse knows more than he lets on," Harold said, his weathered hands cradling a mug of tea. "The way he watches over those girls, the way he stands guard at night, it's something special." Martha nodded, her kind face thoughtful. "Those children have been through so much, Harold. Thunder is their connection to the past, their protector. I think he understands that role better than any human could." Harold sipped his tea, considering his next words carefully. "We need to think about the future, Martha. Those girls can't stay hidden forever. Someone's bound to be looking for them." Martha's expression grew troubled. "I know. But how can we consider sending them back to that monster of a father after what he did?" "We won't," Harold said firmly. "But we need to do right by them legally. Otherwise, we're no better than their father, making decisions about their lives without proper authority." Martha sighed, acknowledging the truth in his words. "Tomorrow," she decided. "Tomorrow we'll go into town and speak with Judge Peterson. He'll know what to do, how to protect the girls while following the law." Harold reached over and took her hand, his touch a comfort in the gathering twilight. "It's the right thing to do," he assured her, "for all of us." As darkness fell, Thunder continued his silent vigil, his powerful presence a reassurance to the sleeping twins and the elderly couple who had opened their hearts and home to two abandoned children, and the remarkable horse who had saved them. Judge William Peterson was not a man easily shocked. In his 30 years on the bench, he had presided over cases that revealed the darkest aspects of human nature. But as he sat in his wood-paneled office, listening to Harold and Martha Collins describe what had happened to Lily and Rose Blackwood, his normally impassive face betrayed his horror. "Let me be clear," he said, removing his reading glasses and pinching the bridge of his nose. "Edward Blackwood, one of the wealthiest men in the county, deliberately abandoned his 6-year-old twin daughters in the forest, and they were rescued by a horse who brought them to your farm." Martha nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "It sounds impossible, I know, but those poor children told us exactly what happened. And that horse, Thunder, he's no ordinary animal. The way he watches over them, the way he found them in the first place, it's remarkable." Judge Peterson leaned back in his chair, considering. He had known Harold and Martha Collins for decades. They were honest, hard-working people, not given to flights of fancy or deception. If they believed this extraordinary story, there must be truth to it. "The girls are still at your farm?" he asked. Harold nodded. "We didn't know what else to do. Couldn't bear the thought of sending them back to a father who would do such a thing." "You did the right thing bringing this to me," Peterson assured them. "But I need to see the children myself, hear their account directly. And I'll need to coordinate with the police investigation that's already underway." Martha's face paled. "Will you take them away from us? They're just starting to feel safe." The judge's expression softened. "I'll do everything in my power to ensure those girls aren't traumatized further. If what you've told me is true, Edward Blackwood will face serious charges and the children will need a safe place to stay." Your farm might be the best option for now, given the circumstances." Relief washed over Martha's face. Harold reached over and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "There is one more thing," Judge Peterson added, his tone grave. "Edward Blackwood is a powerful man with extensive connections. Once he realizes his daughters are alive and can testify against him, he may take desperate measures. I'll arrange for police protection at your farm, but you must be vigilant." The warning cast a shadow over the elderly couple's momentary relief. They had known that sheltering the twins would have consequences, but facing the wrath of a man like Edward Blackwood was a daunting prospect. "We'll protect those children with our lives if necessary," Harold said firmly, his weathered face set with determination. "And so will Thunder." Judge Peterson raised an eyebrow at this last statement but didn't comment. Instead, he picked up his phone. "I'll call Inspector Morgan right away. He's been leading the investigation. We'll arrange to visit your farm this afternoon to speak with the girls." As Harold and Martha left the judge's office, a sense of both relief and apprehension filled them. They had done the right thing, taken the first step toward securing the twins' future, but the road ahead would not be easy. Back at the farm, Lily and Rose were blissfully unaware of the legal machinery that had been set in motion on their behalf. They had spent the morning helping to collect eggs from the chicken coop, giggling as the hens clucked indignantly around their feet. Now they were with Thunder in the paddock, taking turns riding him around the perimeter. Thunder carried them with exquisite care, adjusting his pace to their small bodies, his ears constantly moving as he listened to their chatter and laughter. The change in the twins over the past few days was remarkable. Though still haunted by what had happened, they were beginning to reclaim their childhood joy, their natural resilience asserting itself in this safe haven. When Martha and Harold returned from town, they found the twins braiding colorful ribbons into Thunder's mane, the stallion standing patiently as small fingers worked through his silky hair. The sight brought tears to Martha's eyes. Such innocence after such trauma, such trust after such betrayal. "Lily, Rose," she called softly, approaching the paddock. "We need to talk to you about something important." The twins looked up, their hands stilling in Thunder's mane. Something in Martha's tone made them immediately alert, a reminder that beneath their childish play lay a deep awareness of adult complexities. "Is it about Father?" Lily asked, her voice suddenly small. "Is he looking for us?" Martha chose her words carefully. "Some very kind people want to help make sure you're safe. A judge and a police officer will be coming to talk to you this afternoon. They need to hear your story. What happened in the forest, how Thunder found you, everything." Rose's eyes widened with fear. "Will they take us away from you? Will they take Thunder?" Harold shook his head firmly. "No one is taking anyone anywhere they don't want to go. The judge and the officer are on your side. They want to help." The twins exchanged a look, that silent communication that only twins seemed to master. Then Lily spoke, her voice steadier than before. "We'll tell them everything. We'll tell them how Father drove us into the forest and left us there. We'll tell them how Thunder saved us." Martha nodded, her heart aching for what these children had endured. "That's very brave. And we'll be right there with you the whole time." True to his word, Judge Peterson arrived at the farm that afternoon, accompanied by Inspector Morgan. They approached the situation with remarkable sensitivity, speaking to the twins in the comfortable setting of Martha's kitchen, with Harold and Martha present for support. Thunder, sensing the importance of the moment, had positioned himself by the kitchen window, his large head visible through the glass as he kept watch over his charges. Lily and Rose, though initially nervous, told their story with the straightforward clarity of children. They described how their father had woken them early, told them they were going for a special outing, then driven them deep into the forest. how he had made them get out of the car and walk into the trees, promising a surprise. How they had realized, as his car drove away, that the surprise was abandonment. Their account of wandering lost, growing increasingly frightened as hours passed, brought tears to Martha's eyes. And then their description of Thunder's arrival, how he had found them, comforted them, and carried them to safety, caused even the stoic Inspector Morgan to blink rapidly. "He knew exactly where to take us," Rose said softly, looking toward the window where Thunder kept his vigil. "Like he could read our minds." Judge Peterson and Inspector Morgan exchanged glances. The story was fantastic, almost unbelievable, except that the evidence supported every word. The tire tracks at the forest clearing, the footprints, the hoofprints leading away toward the Collins farm, it all corroborated the twins' account. "You've been very brave," Judge Peterson told the girls when they had finished. "And I promise you, you won't have to go back to your father. What he did was wrong, and he will face consequences for his actions." "Where will we live?" Lily asked, the practical twin always thinking ahead. The judge smiled gently. "For now, if Mr. and Mrs. Collins are willing, you'll stay right here. We'll need to follow proper legal procedures, but I see no reason to move you from a place where you clearly feel safe and loved." The relief on the twins' faces was palpable. Rose looked at Martha and Harold, her eyes wide with hope. "Can we really stay with you?" "For as long as you need, sweetheart," Martha assured her, her voice thick with emotion. "For as long as you need." Outside, Thunder snorted softly, as if expressing his approval of this arrangement. Inspector Morgan glanced at the window, meeting the stallion's intelligent gaze. "That is one remarkable horse," he commented. "I've never seen anything like it." Harold nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Thunder's special, that's for certain. Seems like he was meant to bring these girls here." As the afternoon wore on, plans were made for Edward Blackwood's arrest and the twins' temporary custody arrangement. Judge Peterson promised to expedite the legal processes, ensuring that the girls would remain with Harold and Martha while the case against their father proceeded. The arrest of Edward Blackwood sent shockwaves through the community. The image of the respected businessman being led from his mansion in handcuffs was splashed across the front page of every local newspaper. "Tycoon abandons twin daughters in forest," the headline screamed, followed by the even more incredible, "Heroic horse rescues children from certain death." For many who had done business with Edward over the years, who had attended his lavish parties and envied his success, the revelation of his cruelty was incomprehensible. But for those who had worked closely with him, who had witnessed his cold indifference to his daughters and his calculating approach to relationships, the news confirmed what they had long suspected, that beneath Edward Blackwood's polished exterior lurked a heart of stone. Edward's lawyer, Jameson, had immediately launched a vigorous defense, claiming his client was suffering from temporary insanity brought on by grief over his wife's death. But the meticulous planning involved in abandoning the twins, the isolated location, the early morning timing to avoid witnesses, undermined this narrative. Edward was denied bail, deemed both a flight risk due to his considerable resources and a danger to his daughters, whose testimony would be crucial to the case against him. At the Collins farm, life had settled into a new rhythm. Judge Peterson had arranged for temporary guardianship papers to be drawn up, officially placing Lily and Rose in Harold and Martha's care, while the legal proceedings against their father continued. The twins, relieved to know they wouldn't be forced to return to Blackwood Estate, blossomed under the elderly couple's gentle guidance. The farm offered a completely different lifestyle from what they had known. Instead of being tended to by a rotating staff of nannies and servants, they now participated in the daily routines of farm life, collecting eggs, feeding animals, helping in the vegetable garden. Martha taught them to bake bread, guiding their small hands as they kneaded dough while Harold showed them how to identify different bird calls and track animal footprints in the soft earth around the pond. Thunder remained a constant in their lives, his presence a source of security and comfort. The stallion had fully adjusted to farm life, accepting the simpler stable and less luxurious feed without complaint. He seemed to understand that his role had changed. He was no longer a status symbol but a guardian, a friend, a member of this unconventional family. Each day, the twins spent hours with Thunder, riding him through the meadows that surrounded the farm, or simply sitting beside him in the shade of the old apple tree, telling him their thoughts and dreams. Martha often watched them from the kitchen window, marveling at the bond between the children and the horse. "It's like he understands every word they say," she commented to Harold one evening as they watched the sunset from their porch. "I've never seen anything like it." Harold nodded, his weathered face thoughtful. "Some animals have a wisdom that goes beyond our understanding. Thunder's one of them." The peaceful routine was interrupted one morning by the arrival of a sleek black car that moved slowly up the dusty farm road. Martha, who was hanging laundry on the line, paused mid-motion, a sudden apprehension gripping her. The twins were in the paddock with Thunder, taking turns brushing his glossy coat and chattering about the family of rabbits they had discovered near the vegetable patch. The car stopped and a woman emerged, tall, elegantly dressed, with sharp features and calculating eyes. Martha recognized her immediately from newspaper photographs: Victoria Blackwood, Edward's sister, and the twins' aunt. "Mrs. Collins?" Victoria called, approaching with measured steps. "I'm Victoria Blackwood. I believe you have my nieces." Martha straightened, instinctively moving to position herself between Victoria and the paddock where the twins played. "The girls are under our care by court order," she said firmly. "Judge Peterson arranged it himself." Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, I'm aware of the temporary arrangement, but surely you understand that Lily and Rose belong with family. I'm their closest blood relative now that my brother is indisposed." The careful choice of words, indisposed rather than imprisoned, told Martha everything she needed to know about Victoria's perspective on her brother's crimes. "The girls are happy here," Martha replied, her voice steady despite the unease churning in her stomach. "They've been through a terrible ordeal. Stability is what they need right now." Victoria's expression hardened slightly. "Mrs. Collins, I appreciate what you and your husband have done, truly. But Lily and Rose are Blackwoods. They belong in their world. The best schools, the right connections, the opportunities that their position in society affords them. Can you provide that here on this?" She glanced around, her distaste evident. "Farm?" Before Martha could respond, a commotion from the paddock drew both women's attention. Thunder had raised his head, his ears pricked forward, eyes fixed on Victoria. The stallion moved to the fence, positioning himself protectively in front of the twins, who had fallen silent, watching the exchange between their beloved Martha and the stranger. Victoria's eyes widened as she took in the magnificent horse. "So it's true," she murmured. "The horse that belonged to my brother, the one that supposedly rescued the girls." Her tone made it clear what she thought of this narrative. Martha felt a surge of protectiveness. "Thunder found the girls after your brother abandoned them. He brought them to safety. Without him, those children might have died in that forest." Victoria waved a dismissive hand. "A fanciful story that's made for good press, I'm sure. But let's be realistic. I've already filed for custody of my nieces. My lawyers are confident that the court will recognize the importance of family ties." Martha's heart sank. Victoria Blackwood was clearly cut from the same cloth as her brother, calculating, determined, and accustomed to getting her way. The thought of Lily and Rose being taken from the farm, from the safety and love they had found, was unbearable. "The girls have been through enough," Martha said, her voice low but fierce. "They're healing here. They feel safe for the first time in their lives. Would you really take that away from them?" Victoria studied Martha for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "My car will be here at 9 tomorrow morning," she finally said. "I expect the girls to be ready. They can bring whatever personal items they've accumulated here, but nothing else." She glanced toward the paddock. "Certainly not that horse. He belongs to the estate." With those words, she turned and walked back to her car, leaving Martha standing amidst the half-hung laundry, her heart pounding with fear and anger. As Victoria's car disappeared down the road, Martha hurried to the paddock where the twins waited, their faces pale with concern. "Who was that lady?" Lily asked, her small hand clutching Thunder's mane. "Why was she talking to you about us?" Martha took a deep breath, knowing she couldn't shield the children from the truth but wanting to spare them unnecessary worry. "That was your Aunt Victoria, your father's sister. She thinks you should come live with her." Rose's eyes filled with tears. "But we want to stay here with you and Harold. And Thunder. We don't want to go with her." Martha knelt down, gathering both girls into her arms. "I know, sweetheart. And Harold and I want you to stay too. We'll talk to Judge Peterson right away. He'll know what to do." Thunder watched this exchange, his intelligent eyes moving from the twins to Martha and back again. Then, with deliberate movement, he turned his head to stare down the road where Victoria's car had disappeared, as if memorizing the threat, preparing to meet it. Martha noticed and felt a strange reassurance. Whatever happened next, they wouldn't face it alone. They had Thunder, the extraordinary horse who had already proven his devotion to these children once before. And somehow, Martha sensed, he would do so again if necessary. Harold's truck kicked up dust as it sped down the country road toward town. Martha sat beside him, her face set with determination, while the twins huddled in the back seat, unusually quiet. The visit from Victoria Blackwood had cast a shadow over their hard-won peace, and now they raced against time to prevent the twins from being ripped away from their new home. "Judge Peterson will see us," Martha said, more to reassure herself than anything else. "He'll understand that the girls can't go with that woman." Harold nodded, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Victoria Blackwood may have money and influence, but we have the truth on our side. Those girls were abandoned by her brother. She can't just sweep that under the rug and play happy families now." In the back seat, Lily and Rose held hands, their identical faces pinched with worry. They had only met their Aunt Victoria a handful of times before, at formal family gatherings where she had barely acknowledged their existence. The thought of living with her, of leaving the farm and Harold and Martha and, most unthinkable of all, Thunder, filled them with dread. "Martha," Lily spoke up, her voice small but determined, "if Aunt Victoria comes tomorrow, we won't go with her. We'll hide." Martha turned in her seat, her heart breaking at the fear in the child's eyes. "We're going to do everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen, sweetheart. Judge Peterson will help us." But when they arrived at the courthouse, they discovered that Judge Peterson was in the middle of a trial that would last until late afternoon. His secretary, sympathetic to their plight, promised to inform him of the urgent situation as soon as there was a break in proceedings. "He said to tell you that he'll come to the farm himself this evening," she assured them, "around 6 o'clock. It wasn't the immediate intervention they had hoped for, but it was something. With heavy hearts, they returned to the farm, the shadow of Victoria's morning deadline hanging over them. Thunder sensed their distress the moment they returned. The stallion paced the fence line, watching as the twins climbed out of the truck, their usual exuberance replaced by a quiet solemnity that didn't belong on such young faces. When the girls approached the paddock, Thunder moved to meet them, lowering his head to their level. Lily wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his mane. "Aunt Victoria wants to take us away, Thunder," she whispered. "She's coming tomorrow morning." Rose stroked his velvety nose, tears tracking silently down her cheeks. "We don't want to go. We want to stay here with you and Martha and Harold." Thunder remained perfectly still, allowing the children to cling to him, to draw what comfort they could from his solid presence. But his eyes, dark and intelligent, followed Harold and Martha as they moved toward the house, deep concern evident in their posture. That evening, true to his word, Judge Peterson arrived at the farm. He listened gravely as Martha and Harold explained Victoria's visit and her declaration that she would be taking the twins the next morning. "She can't just show up and take them, can she?" Martha asked, her voice strained. "You gave us temporary guardianship." Judge Peterson sighed, removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. "It's complicated. Victoria Blackwood has filed an emergency petition for custody, citing blood relationship and financial ability to provide for the children. The hearing is set for next week, but she's requesting immediate temporary custody pending that hearing. And will she get it?" Harold asked bluntly. The judge's hesitation was answer enough. "The court often favors blood relatives in these situations," he admitted, "especially ones with the resources to provide materially for the children." "But what about emotional well-being?" Martha protested. "These girls have been traumatized by their father. They're just starting to feel safe here. To uproot them again, to send them with a woman who's practically a stranger to them." "I understand your concerns," Judge Peterson said, "and I share them. But the legal system has its biases and its limitations. Victoria Blackwood has hired Jameson and Associates, one of the most aggressive family law firms in the state. They're pushing hard for this temporary custody order." Outside, as the adults spoke, the twins sat with Thunder in the fading light. They had been sent out to give the grown-ups privacy, but their acute anxiety about what was being decided kept them close to the house, within sight of the kitchen window, where the serious conversation continued. "I wish Thunder could talk," Rose said softly, leaning against the stallion's warm side. "He would tell everyone that we belong here." Lily nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Remember how he found us in the forest? How he knew exactly where to take us? Thunder always knows what to do." Thunder's ears flicked forward at the mention of his name, his gaze moving between the twins and the house where their fate was being discussed. There was an alertness to him, a focused attention that went beyond normal equine behavior. Inside, the conversation had taken a more strategic turn. Judge Peterson, having outlined the legal challenges, was now discussing potential approaches. "The hearing is where we'll have the best chance," he explained. "The girls can testify about their father's actions and express their preference to stay here. Given what they've been through, their wishes will carry significant weight." "But what about tomorrow?" Harold pressed. "Victoria said she'd be here at 9 to take them." Judge Peterson looked troubled. "Legally, she doesn't have the authority yet, but if she shows up with her lawyers and court papers requesting emergency custody, it could get messy. I'll try to file a counter-motion first thing in the morning, but I can't guarantee it will be processed in time." Martha's face paled. "So she could just take them? Just like that?" "Not without a fight," Harold said firmly, his weathered hands clenched into fists on the table. "Those girls aren't going anywhere they don't want to go." The judge looked alarmed. "Harold, I understand your feelings, but I must caution against any action that could be construed as obstruction. That would only hurt your case in the long run." Their discussion continued as darkness fell, exploring every legal avenue, every potential strategy. But by the time Judge Peterson left, promising to do everything in his power to delay Victoria's custody claim, a heavy sense of foreboding hung over the farm. Martha and Harold tucked the twins into bed that night with forced cheerfulness, assuring them that everything would work out. But after the girls had fallen into an uneasy sleep, the elderly couple sat at their kitchen table, the weight of potential loss pressing down on them. "We can't let her take them, Harold," Martha whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "They've been through so much already." Harold reached across the table to take her hand. "We'll do whatever we have to do. Those girls belong here, with us." Outside in his stable, Thunder remained awake long after the lights in the farmhouse had been extinguished. The stallion stood at the half door, his gaze fixed on the dirt road that led to the farm, as if waiting for something or someone. The moonlight cast his powerful silhouette against the stable wall, a sentinel standing guard over the sleeping children whose lives had become so inexplicably entwined with his own. As the night deepened, a plan began to form in Thunder's remarkable mind, a plan born of instinct and intelligence, of loyalty and love. Whatever happened the next morning, he would not allow the twins to be taken away. Not again. Not ever again. Dawn broke over the Collins farm with an ominous stillness. The usual morning sounds, the rooster's crow, the gentle lowing of cows waiting to be milked, the cheerful chirping of birds, seemed muted, as if nature itself sensed the impending confrontation. Harold rose first, his movements slow and heavy as he dressed and made his way to the kitchen. Martha joined him minutes later, her eyes bearing the evidence of a sleepless night. "I kept thinking about what we could do," she said, measuring coffee into the percolator with hands that trembled slightly. "But every option seems impossible. If we refuse to hand over the girls, Victoria could have us arrested. If we try to hide them somewhere, it would only make things worse legally." Harold nodded grimly. Judge Peterson was clear about that. "Our best hope is that his counter-motion gets processed before Victoria arrives." They moved through their morning chores mechanically, trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy for the twins' sake. But the weight of 9 o'clock hung over them like an executioner's axe, drawing inexorably closer with each passing minute. The twins appeared in the kitchen just after 7, already dressed, their identical faces solemn. They had chosen to wear the simple farm dresses that Martha had given them, rather than the expensive clothes they had arrived in, a small act of defiance against the life Victoria intended to return them to. "We want to see Thunder," Lily announced, her voice steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. "We need to say goodbye, just in case." Martha's heart clenched at the resignation in the child's voice. "Of course, sweetheart, but don't give up hope yet. Judge Peterson is doing everything he can." The twins nodded politely but without conviction. At 6 years old, they had already learned the hard lesson that adults, even well-meaning ones, couldn't always protect them from life's cruelties. Hand in hand, they made their way to the stable where Thunder waited. The stallion greeted them with a soft whicker, lowering his head to nuzzle each girl in turn. Something in his demeanor, an alertness, a focused energy, caught Lily's attention. "He knows something's wrong," she observed, stroking his velvet nose. "He always knows." Rose leaned against Thunder's strong neck, inhaling his familiar scent of hay and summer grass. "I wish we could take you with us," she whispered, "but Aunt Victoria said we can't." Thunder's ears flicked forward at the mention of Victoria's name, his dark eyes fixed on the twins with an intensity that might have seemed unnatural in any other horse. He pawed at the ground once, twice, then lowered his head to gently push against Lily's shoulder, nudging her toward the stable door. "What is it, Thunder?" Lily asked, puzzled by his behavior. "What are you trying to tell us?" The stallion continued his gentle nudging, herding both girls out of the stable and toward the paddock gate. Once there, he used his nose to deftly lift the latch, a trick he had observed the humans performing countless times but had never before attempted himself. "Look what he's doing," Rose exclaimed, watching in amazement as the gate swung open under Thunder's careful manipulation. The stallion moved through the opening, then turned to look at the twins expectantly, as if waiting for them to follow. When they hesitated, he returned to their side, his intention unmistakable. "I think he wants us to go with him," Lily said slowly, a spark of hope lighting her eyes. Maybe he has a plan." Rose looked uncertain. "But where would we go? Aunt Victoria will be here soon." Lily reached for her sister's hand. "Thunder saved us once before, remember? In the forest, when Father left us. He knew exactly what to do then." Thunder snorted softly, as if in agreement, and nudged the girls again, more insistently this time. The twins exchanged a look, that silent communication that seemed to transcend words, and then made their decision. "Let's get on," Lily said, quickly, before Martha and Harold see us. With practiced ease, they climbed onto Thunder's broad back, Lily in front and Rose behind her, their small hands gripping his mane. The stallion waited until they were securely seated before moving forward, his pace deliberate but unhurried as he carried them across the paddock, away from the farmhouse toward the rolling hills that bordered the Collins property. Back at the house, Martha was washing the breakfast dishes when she happened to glance out the kitchen window. What she saw made her heart stop. Thunder, with the twins on his back, disappearing over the crest of the nearest hill. "Harold!" she cried, dropping a plate that shattered on the floor. "The girls! They're gone!" Harold rushed to the window, his face paling as he caught a final glimpse of Thunder's tail vanishing from view. "Dear God," he breathed. Where could they be going? Panic gripped them both as they raced outside, calling for the twins. But there was no response, only the echo of their own voices bouncing back from the empty hills. The implications were devastating. Not only were the children missing, but their disappearance would seem like an attempt to circumvent Victoria's custody claim, exactly what Judge Peterson had warned against. As they stood there, paralyzed by fear and indecision, the sound of an approaching car reached their ears. Victoria Blackwood had arrived, precisely at 9 o'clock as promised. Miles away, Thunder carried the twins through terrain he knew by instinct rather than experience. The stallion moved with purpose, navigating steep slopes and dense patches of forest with remarkable sure-footedness. The girls clung to him, trusting his judgment even as they wondered where he was taking them. "Do you think Martha and Harold will be worried?" Rose asked, her voice small against the wind that whipped past them. Lily bit her lip. "Probably. But we left a trail. They can follow us if they want to." The idea comforted them both, that they weren't truly running away, merely postponing the inevitable confrontation with their aunt. They had no destination in mind, trusting completely in Thunder's inexplicable but undeniable wisdom. As the morning wore on, the landscape began to change, the rolling farmland giving way to steeper terrain, more heavily forested. Thunder never faltered, picking his way through streams and around fallen trees, always moving forward with clear intent. "I think I recognize this place," Lily said suddenly, as they entered a particularly dense stretch of forest. "This looks like where Father left us." Rose tightened her grip on her sister's waist, the memory still fresh and painful. Why would Thunder bring us back here? But the stallion continued on, eventually emerging into a familiar clearing, the very spot where Edward Blackwood had abandoned his daughters. The twins tensed, the traumatic memories washing over them, but Thunder didn't linger. He passed through the clearing and continued along a barely visible path that wound deeper into the forest. After what seemed like hours, but was perhaps only 40 minutes, Thunder finally slowed his pace. Ahead, nestled in a small valley surrounded by protective hills, stood a cabin. It was modest but well-maintained, with a small garden in front and smoke curling from the chimney. "Who lives here?" Rose wondered aloud, as Thunder approached the cabin with confidence, as if he had been there many times before. Before Lily could venture a guess, the cabin door opened, and a woman stepped out. She was in her early 30s, with honey blonde hair that caught the sunlight and a face that seemed somehow familiar to the twins. She stared at the approaching horse and its small riders, her hand rising to her mouth in shock. "It can't be," she whispered, but her voice carried in the still mountain air. "Lily? Rose, is that really you?" The twins looked at each other in confusion, then back at the woman who seemed to know them. Thunder came to a halt a few yards from the cabin steps, turning his head to look at the girls with what could only be described as satisfaction. "Who are you?" Lily asked, her naturally protective instincts kicking in. "How do you know our names?" The woman moved closer, her eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and overwhelming joy. "My name is Elizabeth," she said softly. "Elizabeth Blackwood. I'm your mother." The world seemed to stop spinning in that moment. The twins stared at the woman who claimed to be their mother. The mother they had been told died giving birth to them, whose absence had shaped their entire existence. "That's impossible," Lily whispered, her small face pale with shock. "Our mother is dead. Father told us she died when we were born." Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. Of course he would say that. It was easier than telling you the truth. She took a tentative step closer, her gaze drinking in the sight of the daughters she hadn't seen since they were infants. "I never died. Edward sent me away, made me disappear. He told me if I ever tried to contact you, he would make sure I never saw you again." Rose, always quicker to trust than her sister, studied Elizabeth's face. There was something achingly familiar about her. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile, the way she tilted her head slightly as she spoke. These were features Rose saw every day in her own reflection in her sister's face. "You look like us," she said softly, wonder overtaking fear. Elizabeth nodded, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "You have my eyes, both of you, and my mother's golden hair." Lily, still skeptical, wasn't ready to accept this stunning revelation. "If you're really our mother, why didn't you come back for us? Why did you leave us with him?" The pain that crossed Elizabeth's face was raw and genuine. "I tried, Lily, so many times. But Edward had powerful friends, legal documents declaring me unfit, even a death certificate. He controlled everything, the police, the courts, the media. When I threatened to expose him, he threatened you. Said he would send you away where I'd never find you." She wiped at her tears with the back of her hand. "So I stayed hidden, but close, watching from a distance, gathering evidence against him, waiting for the day when I could safely come for you." Thunder, who had remained motionless during this exchange, now moved forward, bringing the twins within arm's reach of their mother. Elizabeth looked at the magnificent horse with a mixture of awe and gratitude. "You brought them to me," she whispered, reaching out to touch his velvety nose. "Somehow, you knew." Thunder nickered softly, leaning into her touch as if they were old friends. And perhaps in some inexplicable way they were, two beings connected by their love for the same children, their desire to protect them from harm. Slowly, carefully, Elizabeth helped the twins down from Thunder's back. Rose went willingly into her mother's embrace, instinctively trusting this woman who felt like a missing piece suddenly found. Lily held back a moment longer, still processing the enormity of the revelation, but eventually stepped forward as well, allowing herself to be enfolded in her mother's arms. "I have so much to tell you," Elizabeth said, her voice thick with emotion. "So much time to make up for. But first, we need to let Harold and Martha know you're safe. They must be frantic with worry." The mention of the elderly couple who had taken them in broke the spell of the reunion. "Aunt Victoria came to take us away," Lily explained. "She said we have to live with her now. That's why Thunder brought us here." Elizabeth's expression hardened. Victoria. Of course, Edward's sister was always as cold and calculating as he was, always helping him, covering for him. She stood up, decision made. We're going back to the farm, together. It's time the truth came out. All of it. The return journey was slower, with Elizabeth walking alongside Thunder, who now carried all 3 Blackwood women. As they traveled, Elizabeth told her daughters the story they had never heard, how she had fallen in love with Edward, believing him to be as kind as he was successful, only to discover after their marriage his true ruthless nature. How, when she had threatened to leave him, he had isolated her, monitored her every move, made her a prisoner in her own home. When I discovered I was pregnant with you two, I thought things would change, she explained. That becoming a father would soften him, but it only made him more controlling. And after you were born, when I saw how he looked at you, not with love but with resentment, I knew I had to get you away from him. Her escape attempt had failed. Edward had caught her preparing to leave with the newborn twins and had enacted his cruel plan, declaring her mentally unstable, fabricating a death certificate with the help of a doctor who owed him a favor, and erasing her from the lives of her daughters. I didn't just give up, Elizabeth assured them. I found a lawyer who believed me, who helped me gather evidence of Edward's crimes, not just against me, but his financial misdeeds, his corrupt business practices. We were building a case strong enough that even his connections couldn't protect him. And then, just as we were preparing to move, I heard about what happened to you in the forest. The news of Edward's arrest had reached her in her mountain hideaway. Though relieved that he would face justice, her only thought had been for her daughters, now alone in the world, or so she believed, until Thunder had appeared with them on his back, fulfilling a mother's desperate prayers. As they neared the Collins farm, they could see several vehicles parked in the yard, Harold's truck, Victoria's sleek black car, and 2 police cruisers. Elizabeth tensed but didn't falter. Whatever happens, she told the twins, remember that I love you. I have always loved you every day since you were born. The commotion in the farmyard ceased abruptly as Thunder appeared over the hill, carrying his precious cargo. Martha was the first to spot them, her cry of relief bringing everyone else running. Harold, Victoria, Inspector Morgan, and several officers. Victoria's face drained of color as she recognized the woman walking beside the horse. Elizabeth, she gasped, taking an involuntary step backward. That's impossible, you're dead. Elizabeth's gaze was steel as she helped her daughters dismount. Not dead, Victoria. Just hidden. Hidden by your brother when he realized he couldn't control me anymore. Inspector Morgan stepped forward, his professional demeanor momentarily shaken. Mrs. Blackwood? Elizabeth Blackwood? Elizabeth nodded. Yes, Inspector. And I have a great deal to tell you about my husband, about the crimes he committed against me and planned to commit against our daughters. She placed a protective hand on each twin's shoulder. But first, I believe Victoria was attempting to claim custody of my children. Victoria's shock had quickly morphed into calculation. You have no rights here, she spat. You were declared dead years ago. Legally, you don't exist. Actually, came a new voice as Judge Peterson emerged from the farmhouse. That's not quite accurate. He approached Elizabeth with a mixture of amazement and professional interest. If you are indeed Elizabeth Blackwood and can prove your identity, the death certificate would be invalidated. As the children's mother, presumed dead under fraudulent circumstances, your parental rights would be reinstated. Victoria's face contorted with fury. This is absurd. She abandoned her children. She's clearly unstable. But her protests fell on deaf ears. The evidence of Elizabeth's identity was written on her face, in the unmistakable resemblance she shared with her daughters, and the story she told of Edward's manipulation, her forced disappearance, her years of hiding while gathering evidence against him, rang with the undeniable clarity of truth. In the days that followed, Elizabeth's legal resurrection was set in motion. Her lawyer, who had worked with her during her years in hiding, presented the evidence they had gathered against Edward. Evidence that not only supported her claims of his crimes against her, but also implicated Victoria in helping to cover them up. As for Thunder, the remarkable horse who had saved the twins twice over, his place in the family was never in question. When Elizabeth decided to stay at the Collins farm, at least temporarily, while she re-established her legal identity and the case against Edward proceeded, Thunder remained with them, a constant, watchful presence in the lives of the reunited family. How did he know? Martha wondered aloud one evening, as they all sat on the porch watching Thunder graze peacefully in the paddock. How did he know to bring the girls to their mother? Elizabeth smiled, watching her daughters who were now playing a game of tag around the old oak tree. I used to come to the estate sometimes, just to catch a glimpse of the girls from a distance. I would bring apples for the horses, including Thunder. Perhaps he remembered my scent or sensed the connection somehow. Harold nodded thoughtfully. Some things can't be explained by logic alone. The bond between a mother and her children, the wisdom of animals, these are mysteries beyond our understanding. As the sun set over the Collins farm, painting the sky in brilliant hues of gold and pink, Thunder raised his head to watch the twins, safe now, loved now, their future secure in ways he could not comprehend, but had somehow helped to ensure. His mission was complete. The abandoned children had found their way home, not to a place, but to the hearts that had always been waiting for them. Elizabeth, observing the stallion's watchful gaze, walked to the fence and placed her hand gently on his strong neck. "Thank you," she whispered, words inadequate for the debt she owed this extraordinary creature. "Thank you for bringing my daughters back to me." Thunder turned his intelligent eyes to her, and in that gaze was a wisdom as old as time itself, the unspoken understanding that some bonds transcend explanation, that love finds its way through the darkest forests, and that sometimes the most unlikely heroes are the ones who lead us home.